Franklin County Commissioners meeting, May 12th, 2020.
Good morning. It is 9 a.m. on Tuesday, May 12th at our regular Tuesday morning board meeting. We have all three commissioners on board this morning, our administrator and our clerk of the board, and sheriff and planner are in the audience. So if you, we would start with the Pledge of Allegiance, if you'd join me.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. First item on the agenda is approval of minutes. We have minutes for April 28th of 2020. If there's no addition, changes, or corrections, I'll sign as presented.
Looks good to me.
Good.
All right. Carry on into the next item on the agenda is lots of minutes there. Aging and Long-Term Care Proclamation. It is a 2020 proclamation, whereas Franklin County, Washington includes a growing number of older Americans who make countless contributions to our community every day. And whereas Franklin County, Washington is stronger when people of all ages, abilities, and backgrounds are included and encouraged to make their mark. And whereas Franklin County, Washington recognizes the importance of the physical, mental, social, and emotional well-being of its citizens. And whereas Franklin County, Washington can support our community members by promoting independence, inclusion, and participation, engaging older adults through education, recreation, and service, connecting people with opportunities to share their time, experience, and talents. Now, therefore, the Board of County Commissioners of Franklin County, Washington hereby proclaims May 2020 to be the Older Americans Month and urges every resident to recognize older adults and the people who support them as essential and valuable members who greatly contribute to our community. Dated this 12th day of May, 1920, and will be signed by the three commissioners. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, with all due respect, being as you are slightly the senior member of our board, I think this is 2020, not 1920.
Oh, is that what it is? I'm sorry, 2020.
Just a simple slip of the tongue. But when we're talking about older Americans, it's a little humorous.
Senior moment for sure. Huh?
Oh, I do it myself.
Right.
I just would like to note that this seems especially fitting in these current times where our older citizens and seniors are perhaps more vulnerable to the current pandemic challenges, and happy to see that we're doing this and happy to move for approval of this proclamation as presented.
And I'd just like to add that if we're going to find our way out of this mess, we need to look to our seniors for the wisdom, because they've lived so many more years than we have, and therein lies the answers to a lot of our problems. And we need to be listening to our seniors.
Yeah. Thank you. Our next item.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, there is a motion on the floor.
Oh,
I second.
All in favor?
Aye. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next item on business is public comment. We actually have two times for public comment, but because of the format of our meetings, I would welcome you to call in whenever you have a chance, and we'll go on cue, if nothing else, and be answered as rapidly as we can. So public comment is open.
We have no callers on the queue at the moment, so
okay.
We can proceed.
All right. With that, we will go on to paying the bills, payroll and warrant rosters.
Mr. Chairman, we have one fiscal note this morning. It is fund expenditures. Move for approval as presented. Total amount of $192,341.46. And for the record, note this has been reviewed by the county administrator and 2 representatives from the county auditor's office.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And that would be the only fiscal item this morning.
One and only. Okay, we have, moving rapidly here this morning, we're down to approval of the consent agenda 1 through 6.
And, Mr. Chairman, move for approval of the consent agenda, 6 items as presented.
I second with no discussion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Moving so rapidly through here, I don't know if we'll have time, people take time to dial the phone or not this morning. Anyway, all in favor on the consent agenda is an aye.
Aye.
It takes us down to Keith, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Last week we had a brief discussion about the possibility of joining with a number of other counties, sending a letter to the governor from our county commission requesting more speedy response to reopening the economy and suggesting that county leaders were in the best position to determine what should happen at the local level. As you remember, there were some problematic language in the original draft of that several counties felt needed to be modified. That language was in fact modified. It has been distributed by email over the past few days, and in most of those counties that had originally said they were not willing to participate in the original letter have now agreed to participate in this letter campaign to the governor. I have just received individual assurance from each of you that you want to support this current version of the letter. I have it for your signature today. It's worded the way the other counties have worded it, took out some of that more caustic language and inserted it with a little more of a professional perspective, despite the fact that we are well on record of disagreeing with a number of the decisions the governor has made with regard to COVID-19 reaction. And so I invite your signature to that letter this morning so I can get it sent to the governor's office.
So, Keith, with that, do you have a total of counties that are willing to sign on?
Not off the top of my head. That number is determinable. I'm going to refer to the clerk. Do you happen to have a number? I would say it's a majority of counties that are participating in
Majority of the 39, so we're going to be well over 20?
Yes.
Good.
Yeah. Particularly those that were concerned on the eastern side of the state. That I don't want to speak for them, but I think there's a clear message that they feel like the western interests are a little bit different than some of the more agricultural, rural interests that we have on this side of the state, recognizing that there are states over there, or counties on that side of the state that have some of the same similar issues that we have. It's a broad base of support for this effort.
So, Mr. Chairman, I just note that it's been suggested in a few circles that counties and county commissioners have a lot more power, authority in these matters regarding the governor's actions than we might think. And I just want to speak to that for a minute. I think it's simultaneously true and false. It's absolutely false as an individual county and board of commissioners because we are extensions of state government. But as a collective, when we work together, I think it's very true. And that's what was the genesis of the Washington State Association of Counties and the Legislative Steering Committee of that organization. And when we can get a majority of counties to sign on, it does send, I think, a very powerful and influential message. So I'm happy to see we're doing this letter. And while it might not be as artfully written or capture exactly the sentiments that each of us want, I think the much more important point is that we now have enough counties to have some gravity and some weight to the letter. So I appreciate everybody's support for it. With that, move for formal board approval of signing this letter out to the governor.
I second.
No further discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Keith?
I think that's all I have for official business this morning. Looks like we have one caller waiting for public comment. I would just maybe, in closing, in terms of administration office business, give a general update. The governor announced last week that there were 10 counties in the state of Washington that could seek a variance to some of his restrictions. It's based primarily on the lack of confirmed COVID-19 cases within those counties, as well as the very small populations. They were all counties that had a population of less than 75,000. That certainly has precipitated the question of what's it going to take for other counties to be able to seek a variance or to open up earlier. We're still a ways away from that. Franklin County, unfortunately, at least statistically, has one of the higher rates of infection at the current time, and that information is being used to tell Franklin County that we're a ways away from being able to move into the subsequent phase 2, 3, and 4. We expect at least a period of time of 15 days between each phase. We're essentially moving toward phase 1 now. Hopefully within a couple of weeks be able to move to phase 2. But right now we're a little bit behind where some of the other counties may be. So I know everybody's anxious to get this behind us, get the economy open and functioning again. But I just want to make sure that everybody understands exactly where we are in the process.
So Keith, with that, I know on the conference call that you and I were on, a lot of the counties that were on that conference call mentioned the fact that there's no clarity on these phases. Has there been any further clarity as far as what's going on with these phases and what can be done in these phases? Because nobody knows what's supposed to be happening.
It's a really interesting question, frankly, because the variance is granted by the State Department of Health, essentially, under the governor's final approval. But I understand that 7 of the 10 counties that have received their variance still don't understand exactly what they have done or need to do to maintain that variance. And so those instructions or details are still coming. And it is a bit confusing to those of us that are trying to know what it is we need to do to meet the data or the targets to ask for that kind of variance. And I would add on top of that, the federal government, as you know, adopted what's known as the CARES Act, which is COVID Relief Act funding to assist states as well as local governments in their COVID-19 fight, but have not, as of yet, detailed the specific requirements of using those funds. There's some general high-level guidance, but there are a number of specific questions that they have not yet answered. So those things are still being discussed and evaluated.
You said you had somebody on queue?
Yes, we do. Michelle Anders is on. Good morning, Michelle.
Good morning, gentlemen. Would it be possible to hear the letter read clearly so we know what's going up as your constituents? And then I have a few comments that I would like to add to your discussion.
Would you like me to read that, Commissioner?
Absolutely.
pile here.
I can't hear anything.
Just getting
We're
it out. I
shuffling
had it
papers
in the
here.
pile over to the clerk already, so.
Okay, this is the content of the letter. It's addressed today, May 12th, 2020, to the Honorable Jay Inslee. Governor Inslee, we are living in unprecedented times. The effects of COVID-19 could not have been predicted, and we recognize the strong early response effort you initiated in light of unknown consequences and dire forecasts provided by health experts. However, we are now seeing the unintended effects of these measures that lack any solid termination date. Washington State commissioners are and have been on the front lines working with community members. People from every corner of the state are suffering. Businesses are closing, unemployment checks are not being received, and our citizens need help now. As governor for our state, you declared an emergency on February 29, 2020. The Stay Home, Stay Healthy order was enacted on March 23, 2020. It is now May 12th, 50 days, getting close to 2 billing cycles for rent, mortgage, utilities, insurance, car payments, and payroll commitments. Property taxes are due. The list goes on and on. Most of these businesses, unemployed workforce, have nothing coming in to pay these obligations with. The hospitals are bleeding money because the flood of virus-stricken patients that was predicted did not materialize, so they are sitting with empty beds and furloughed employees. Farmers of every kind are looking at dumping and destroying crops because all the restaurants are essentially closed and the market is backed up. This is true for the meat and dairy markets as well. We and they have been patient, but this can only last so long. We need solutions to salvage and restore our crumbling economy as we watch the people in our communities lose everything they have worked for. You stated in your launch of the Safe Start plan last week that you, quote, fully recognize the impact this is having on families, workers, and businesses, but we have not yet won the fight against the virus, close quote. If you do, in fact, truly understand the impact on your citizens, you will realize that the glacial speed of this process is killing the citizens of this state in ways the virus does not. It is killing them financially, emotionally, and through undiagnosed other physical conditions not attended to due to fear of our inability to see a doctor or go to the hospital. We collectively urge you to alter the current narrative to allow us to launch a tandem effort to halt the spread of the virus while simultaneously allowing our businesses to start to reopen. We have been receiving plans from our businesses, detailed plans that cover how they intend to open to the public but still observe heightened cleaning methods and adequate distancing and personal protection to discourage close contact. By all means, leave the emergency order in place so that people remain aware and vigilant, but remove the arbitrary restrictions of essential and non-essential businesses and services to allow our counties to actually begin to open up and operate again. Show us and the people who have empowered us to serve them that you not only hear these issues, but are actively working to rectify this situation. You, under the emergency powers entrusted to the governor, have the ability to turn this around. Please do so. As elected officials, all of us serve the people, and we need to lead them in a way that preserves not only their physical health and safety, but their economic health and safety. We believe this can successfully be done in tandem at a more rapid pace than is being done. We implore you to allow us to take local control with the help and support that the state can give. COVID-19 is real and it is serious, but it affects every county differently. We strongly hope you will work with us and allow us to create plans within our individual counties that address our individual county needs. We stand ready to assist you in getting all of Washington back on the road to desperately needed economic recovery. Respectfully, Franklin County Board of Commissioners. Do you have further comments, Michelle?
Thank you for reading that for me. I didn't know if he was done, so I'd want to be sure. But I would add to that as a citizen that he's forcing us to choose between neighbors, and we can take care of both. And the mitigation needs to be done, but mitigation should be told to Governor Inslee is not elimination. We have to do the best we can for both neighbors, and we should not be forced to choose. And that's what's being done. I also sent a template that can be customized and coordinated for city, state, and county governments. And I hope that is helpful. If you have something better, by all means use it. But I would ask all three of my commissioners to move forward in developing the plans and calling for the input from the private citizens and supporting them, even if they get sued. Support them, as well as the medically at risk. I can't think of anyone, like my brother who has a wife and MS, that would come into the house after working and not do something to make sure he didn't bring anything into her. Or my brother that serves in a radiology setting in the Hood River, Oregon. I can't think of anyone that would risk that. But there are people that are stupid. But Governor Inslee cannot hold everybody to the lowest denominator. We have to lift each other up to the highest level we can to mitigate for each other and allow our businesses to open. And I truly assert, strongly assert, to all three commissioners to work in unity. And I won't comment further today on that, but I am tired of the extraneous activities. And I will leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. No other callers at the moment.
Okay. Great. So, any other public comments, gentlemen? Derek, you're somewhat open back up for business. Would you address that, please?
Come to the microphone.
Yeah, we're pretty. I mean, basically what's happened is we've been locked down. What we were able to do is we were operating under the essential construction release that occurred starting on the 23rd. That's transitioned into now we have the construction recovery plan that came out, I want to say 2 weeks ago. And what basically we've been operating under is the WABO, Washington Association of Building Officials, interpretation of that. And basically, if there was an application that was submitted by the 23rd of March, our view is those are existing as well, because those parties, when they submitted, had no idea. They had certain expectations. People that submit after the 23rd, they submitted under a new paradigm, shall we say, and there may be there's more restrictions potentially with those applications as to whether or not we're allowed to go out and do the inspections and stuff like that. That said, it's very rare for a contract or a construction project to start without some sort of a contract. When we look at the contract definitions of what we're allowed to use as a contract that was signed by the 23rd, it's pretty broad when it comes to construction, lease arrangements, various other things. So basically, if you've got a contract that was signed by the 23rd, we're also honoring those. So if you show us evidence of that, then we have the ability to say, yep, we're allowed to let this one move forward. So we're back to full staff for the most part. A couple of us are teleworking in the afternoons, but we're back up to full building. And yeah, we're doing inspections. One thing we can't address or necessarily do anything about is the inspections that are from other agencies. We can only control those things that are under our purview. Unfortunately, has been creating some issues with some projects where perhaps the health district can't do the septic analysis, and we can't figure out whether or not that's an appropriate place to locate the building because we don't know where the septic's going to go, and it could totally change everything up. L&I, electrical inspections, are unfortunately jamming up some of our framing inspections because we can't do framing until the L&I signed off on the electrical. Then we go in, we inspect the plumbing, everything that's in that wall, in that frame, and then they can cover it up. So there's some of these things where we are working around those. But unfortunately, there are some circumstances that just we're locked up on some project potentially because of the agencies that have other things, and they just can't get to it, and we can't move beyond that point until it does. Try to minimize that as much as possible, but it does happen occasionally. And I'm happy to answer any questions. I was going to do a presentation next week, but since I'm standing here.
Well, seeing you in the audience, just, everybody is pretty curious about what's the next step.
Yeah, and that's what I heard last week, and some of those concerns that were expressed. That's why and things are just moving. So we right now are, like I said, so the things that are coming in after, again, most of those will have a contract. Most of those contracts are signed months in advance of actual submittal and things like that. So those things that are still coming in that have those contracts or there's been some adjustments to where you can do like remodels and things like that. So where we can accommodate it and we're not in violation, we are, and it seems to be we're pretty busy. Planning is a little bit different.
Excuse me, Derek.
Yeah.
Before you go into a new phase of your discussion, I want to follow up on a comment about some projects being held up by agencies other than yours or offices other than yours for a variety of potential reasons. My question is, have any of those agencies, whether it's the Health Department, LNI, anybody else, given you any insight or explanation or details as to what is driving that delay? Have they said, we're not doing that now? Have they said, we're overwhelmed with requests and getting to them as fast as we can? I think it makes a real distinction whether or not they're doing them but backed up versus they're not doing them. Do you have any insight on that?
For example, the health district and I spoke last week, I think it was last Monday, might have been the Monday before, but I'm pretty sure it was last Monday. He called me and said, hey, giving you a call to let you know we're finally starting to get back to projects. They've been running around doing the tracking, doing what they've been doing for the COVID-19. That's where almost all their resources have gone. He goes, however, we're 100 applications behind.
I'm sorry, I can't hear.
100 applications behind. So it's going to be a while for them, but he now has staff working on those, whereas they weren't. L&I and this is kind of rumor mill or average, I've heard from a couple different people that L&I is about 6 weeks out. My understanding of that has to do with staffing primarily, just because, again, they're probably reducing staff. I don't know that for sure, but yeah, that's what I've heard. When I hear those numbers, sometimes that's the case. They tend to, as we do also, present the worst case scenario for someone. So it's possible that they are able to do them sooner than that, but their standard response seems to be about 6 weeks out.
So, Derek, you made a comment there that there are 100 applications behind. That is for Benton and Franklin County combined, correct?
That's my understanding, yes.
And you also made a comment that they're involved in the tracing and tracking of individuals, correct?
I wouldn't say individuals. I don't know all of that stuff. I'm just saying that's where he said that they were investing
according
in
to
resources.
Governor Inslee, this is what he stated, that he's using 4 departments, and one of them was Department of Health, Department of Licensing, Labor and Industries, and they're using these agencies, or departments, I should say, to trace and track people who might have been in contact with COVID.
Okay.
So are we seeing their workforce as far as inspections being now delegated to tracing and tracking instead of doing their job with the health department on building sites for the septic systems?
That is what was communicated to me, but is now not necessarily the case. Now they do have staff working on it, whereas before according to Mr. Dawson, they were focused 100% on COVID-19.
Okay.
Further questions?
The reason I ask is because last week we got that balance sheet laid in front of us, and they're, $3 million behind? So they're asking us to make it up, the 2 counties, for their salary is going up $40,000
Right.
per month. So are we
been-
asking to hire more people so that they can trace and track and then try to get back to their delegated responsibilities?
Yeah, I'm not aware of their specific personnel plan, whether they had to
I'm going to ask at the next Board of Health.
hire people, but yeah.
Okay.
Anything else?
Thanks, Derek.
Thank you, Derek. Anybody else on the phone?
No other callers, Commissioner.
Anything, Sheriff? Thank you. Commissioners?
Keith, are we going to start addressing our own budget and the shortfalls we might be having due to the decrease in sales revenue, tax revenue, and other revenues that are going to be shortfalling? We got to sort of get in front of this instead of waiting for it to happen. I think we really need to be looking again at track facility, since they can't have events. We're paying for salaries.
And there's a number of factors that go into that, but the short answer is yes. Part of the challenge that we have in terms of being predictive is information from the Department of Revenue at the state level that collects and then remits our sales taxes to us generally is about 2 months behind. So we don't know what March and April receipts are until May and June. That creates its own set of challenges in terms of trying to predict. Secondly, in terms of the HAPCO Center specifically, they are booking some new engagements in anticipation of being able to open around the 1st of June. A couple of the entities that work out at the Hanford site, for example, need some large meeting space, and they need to have it large enough to be able to socially distance within the meeting space. For example, if we had a group in this room, we'd get 12 people in here, but when you need to meet with 30 to 50 people, you need a much larger meeting space. And so we've been talking with them about the possibility of hosting some of their training meetings as we open up. Also, with respect to employees, I want to be careful because in many cases, if you were to furlough or lay people off, you might save money in the long term, but it might cost you significantly in the short term because we are required by law to pay them all of their PTO or vacation or sick leave accruals up front. So we would be required to cash that out up front, which would, in many cases, have a more negative impact on the current year budget by having to pay those out as well as pay their unemployment during their period of unemployment. And then when the economy, we presume, opens up again, have to bring those people back or rehire at least those positions. So we've been careful to avoid pulling that trigger, as it were, making that recommendation just yet until we have a better idea what the actual revenue impact is going to be. We have instructed department heads and agencies to cut back spending wherever they can. They've, I think, done a commendable job of trying to do that. There are some essential projects that we have continuing to move forward that we know we're going to have to do anyway for compliance or legal reasons. But generally speaking, we're making every effort to try to restrain spending, and until we have a better idea of what our revenue picture for the year looks like. But your point's well taken of trying to stay ahead of this. And we're in the same position that every other county in the state of Washington is in trying to anticipate how significant and how long-term these effects are going to be. Quite often when you do layoffs or furloughs, you're anticipating that you won't be needing those positions to come back, but presumably when the economy comes back, we would be then in a position of having to bring those employees back. The work is there. It needs to be done. But it's a situation where we're trying to balance some of that to make sure that we don't spend more now up front in anticipation of saving something that's not going to materialize.
So in essence, what we need is clarity from the governor on these phases of opening. We have no clarity on this right now.
Clarity and moving quicker to open up the economy. Yeah.
Okay. Yes.
I've had several entities ask if we are going to meet on the 26th, which is the day after Memorial Day. I have tentatively told them yes, but I would like to know from the board what they would like to do on that day.
I'm good. I'll meet that day.
I think it makes sense to look at the demand for board action about a week from now If some people have got travel schedules and they want extended vacation, normally I'd say that might be a reason, but I don't think people are traveling quite as much right now, given the circumstances. So I would say we look at it next week.
Well, the reason they are asking is because they turn in the items prior to next week, and so they're wanting to know if they could get their paperwork in.
Most of them do.
The Friday before.
Yeah, well, I'm always happy to meet. That's not at all the issue, but I'd sure hate to say that we'll forego that meeting and then something comes up and we end up calling a special meeting. Historically, we've looked at that the week prior, if I remember.
Yeah.
That would be my suggestion.
Look at it next week.
Mr. Chairman, we do have one more member of the public that would like to comment
Okay.
online. This is Matthew Morrell. Morrell, I'm not sure if I'm saying his name right. Matthew. Good morning, Matthew.
Good morning.
Good morning. You are in the Board of Commissioners meeting. Invite you to share with us your public comments.
I just, when you guys had your internal audit done, I came up and I was asking about any discrepancies within the travel department, because you guys said you didn't have any findings at all. So I went and did a public records poll, and it looked like when I did a public records poll on all the travelers, on all the travel for the commissioners, I did notice a few discrepancies on that. I was bouncing everything off of how the district attorney does it, and it looked like there was the paperwork either isn't filled out right, or there's definitely a discrepancy for Commissioner Peck, and there was also a couple for Commissioner Cook. And I was wondering if you guys could either explain that, or if you guys could look into it for me, so we can better understand how that's supposed to work, or if there's anything going on there.
Yeah, I'll speak to that since he's used my name in it. The commissioners 8 or 10 years ago passed a resolution, and it set out a practice where we would deduct a certain amount of mileage off of a vehicle travel to represent the distinction between, say, a trip to the coast for business, or local travel. But our Franklin County travel policy, which had been updated multiple times, excludes that. And either it got dropped out or it was never in. But it created a confusion if a person was working off of the county travel policy approved by the board or an 8-year-old resolution that had fallen out of sight. I noticed this myself several months ago. In fact, I sent a written request to the prosecutor's office. I don't know if it was December, January, it was months ago, to review state statutes, our county policy, and the practice of people who receive travel allowances. They completed that just recently, a couple of weeks ago. Mr. Johnson was part of that process, and I've already gone through the process of reviewing my own travel vouchers, and in some of those, the 50-mile allowance got dropped out, so the staff has been working for, I don't know, a couple of months now probably, reconciling that to make sure that it's all cleaned up and correct. And that's my piece of it. The other commissioners will need to look at their own and see if they had the same issue with the lack of clarity between the 8-year-old resolution and our board-approved travel policy. The other piece to it, which goes a little bit deeper, is that there's a sort of inherent question in the statute that if you're one of the 4 people authorized to receive a travel allowance, the prosecuting attorney and the 3 commissioners, what statutorily does that really cover? If you get a vehicle mileage allowance in lieu of the county providing you a vehicle, does that mean that that allowance covers all vehicle travel, including, let's say you had a trip in Salt Lake City and for some reason you either chose not to fly or the flights weren't available, whatever the reason was. The question was, what does that mileage allowance cover, or that travel allowance? Is it just local? Is it to the coast? And so I've gotten a written opinion from the prosecutor's office that I think will benefit the county in terms of updating our county policy, which Mr. Johnson's already working on, is underway. So it's a great question, and whenever we find things in our own policies and procedures that either conflict with some other guidance or are unclear, we deal with them. So like I say, I started that effort months ago, and we're just at the tail end of it now, and find your question very timely.
Yeah, well, I apologize. I wanted to be in there in person to do this. But I did see your email from, I think it was like back in 2014 when I pulled those records all the way back to 2010. I do believe it was 2010 that I put down to current. And I saw your email that you sent out for clarification on that in 2014. And it looked like everything was great on your side for a little while. There wasn't much travel there for a bit with you either. So, and then it seemed like things kind of shifted a little bit for 2017 and 18. But I would just, I would like to kind of see if you had any emails, or if you guys would be willing to share those emails from the district attorney with me. Obviously, I can put in for record on that. And then also, I'd like to see an independent review done on that, just to make sure that we're not missing something on the internal side.
So just a couple of follow-ups on that. Excuse me, the request that I did to the prosecuting attorney's office, excuse me, was in writing, and I'm happy to share that with you. As for anything that the prosecuting attorney's office has sent to the board, I would direct you to them as to whether or not it's something that they're able to provide. But I'm more than happy to provide anything that you want that I've provided. The reference to several years ago was a different matter, and it had to do, it fell about in the time frame, as I recall, of the Dennis Houston embezzlement case with Public Works. And in that particular scenario, Mr. Houston was responsible for calculating the rental rates that in turn determined the travel rates for the commissioners. So it was and for the prosecuting attorney. It's a very different matter, and thank you for pointing out that I was the one who raised the flag on that as well, and sent an email to the county auditor's office, Mr. Beaton, asking them to audit that process, because while I didn't have any evidence, something about it didn't look right, didn't add up to me. And sure enough, by the time we got done, it was inaccurate as a result of Mr. Houston's, we'll call them auditing practices, but he's in prison now. I think we know what those auditing practices really were. Anyway, but that was a separate matter. The current one that I identified a few months ago and asked for a review on is what is the monthly travel allowance for the prosecuting attorney and the commissioners? What does that intend to cover and not cover? And why don't we have the reference to the 50-mile deduction in our board-approved county travel policy? And a few other questions. So I appreciate your diligence. I share that thinking that anywhere we can find a fracture in the process, we clean it up. As for my own part, I won't speak for the other commissioners. I've already asked the staff to go through all of mine, and if there's any adjustments that are needed on any of them, to go ahead and make those. I guess lastly, I'd offer that, the whole travel allowance process is predicated on the fact that it's cheaper for the county. And so part of the review that we're looking at is, would it in fact maybe be less expensive for the county if the commissioners just had county vehicles? If it turns out to be the case, I'm fine with that too. But the records need to be right, and our policies need to be complete, and currently they're not. And appreciate the staff's help in and fixing that.
Yeah, I was gonna turn stuff into to SOA if we can't seem to figure out exactly where we need to be at on that. I've been on other board of directors, and travel is always a huge loss for no matter what department or what company you're with.
Yeah,
There's always imbalances on that side.
I would encourage you to submit it.
And I understand that.
Yeah, I would encourage you to submit it to whomever. The more eyes we have on our processes, the better able we are to make sure that they're proper and complete. That's always a good idea. We should never be reluctant to have anybody, whether it's the state or locally, look at our processes. Continuous improvement is where we should be. This is no exception.
Okay. Perfect.
Also,
so I can go ahead and submit that then, that we can get that ball rolling sooner than later.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Also, Matthew, before
Thank you very much. I sure do appreciate that, and I appreciate your guys' time, commissioners.
Hold on just a second, Matthew.
Matthew, can you hear me?
Yes.
This is Bob.
Yes, I can.
Okay.
Yes, Bob.
I would be interested in what you found as a discrepancy in mine. I had not been aware of it, but I'd like to be able to clean it up.
Yeah, there was just a few that were 95% of yours, or 98% of yours were 100% accurate. There was just a few that were different. You have a company vehicle, correct, or a county vehicle?
I do.
If I remember correctly.
Yeah.
Okay, so I might not be understanding exactly how yours report, but it seemed like it was only when you drove your personal vehicle due to inclement weather was the only time that there was a difference on anything, and that might just be my misunderstanding on it. So if you wouldn't mind looking at it, that would be great.
Yeah. Well, I do know, Matthew, that there is in the policy an option for personal vehicle in inclement weather, because I drive a four-wheel drive large
Absolutely.
pickup, and then get into going over to Olympia, for instance, over the pass. That I would rather be up a little bit taller in the traffic than down in that little Colorado down in the midst of the trucks. So.
Absolutely.
So.
And Matthew, I'd just like to say,
I agree with you 100%.
Yeah, let me know if the discrepancies, and we'll make sure they get worked out.
and Matthew,
Okay, absolutely. I'll email that over.
I'd
Thank
just
you.
like to add that in my short term as commissioner, I have not put in for any reimbursement, and I will not put in for any reimbursement because my salary is sufficient enough. Thank you.
Yeah, I did not notice any reimbursement stuff for you, Commissioner Didier.
Thank you, Matthew, for addressing that.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. And you guys have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Nothing else?
Nope.
Anything else, gentlemen?
No, I think we're good.
Okay. With that, we are adjourned. Thank you.